So if you look at Dana's history, we date back to 1904. We have 83 major manufacturing facilities across the globe. In 2024, we did $10.3 billion in sales, have 9 tech centers, and 30 countries with Dana's footprint. We currently employ 39,000 people globally and have customers in 135 countries. So a couple things. We'll just start with kind of the mission, values, and visions of Dana. So the vision of Dana is to power innovation to move our world. So Dana does a lot of torque transfer, power technologies. Pretty much if there's a vehicle out there, there's probably some aspect of Dana. So our mission is to drive stakeholder value. And how you do that is you have reliable products that power vehicles and machines around the world through sustainable processes and invention and execution. And you make things happen where people live, right? People want to be part of their community, and Dana does a great job of embedding themselves into the communities. So just a quick highlight of the agenda, we'll just get started. So getting started, I think that was a big thing when I was first introduced to a priori, is how do we start with this? So we talk about, do you have to push it from the bottom up or from the top down? Fortunately, we have a very engineering-focused leadership team. So our engineering leadership was actually the ones that interacted with a priori and brought it down to us. So they evaluated the tool, said we believe it can provide value to Dana. Now, how can we use it and deploy it in our organization? The goal is to get a priori into the hands of the users that can make an impact. And where we felt that opportunity started was at the design phase. But in order to get it to the design phase, you had to make sure it was robust, right? We had to make sure that the tool provided outputs that would reflect what we were currently getting in the market today. So what we did is we formed a team, and that team had to get together and establish a vision. Again, that vision was aligned with the leadership organization. So when you say I want to start with a vision, what that means is, what does success really look like? So we can start a project and start an endeavor, but if we don't know where we're going or how we plan to get to the end goal, we could do a whole lot of work and end up nowhere. So we had to establish, what did success look like? And in order to do that, you have to set up kind of gateways or stage gates along the way. What are accurate goals or KPIs that would indicate that you're making success? How are you making sure that the work that you're doing day in and day out is getting you in the right direction? So we established some hard checkpoints. As you know, through the a priori process, we established sprints. Those sprints, we analyzed different parts of our business and identified areas of opportunity where we thought would make the most impact. The areas that we wanted to improve, we know that every organization and process isn't perfect. So where do we start? We start with, where are there gaps in information? You know, it was mentioned that various groups and cross-functional teams and organizations hold pieces of information and don't necessarily want to let them go. So we had to get to a culture to where we could share information across those cross-functional teams. And where a lot of those gaps lied were cost breakdowns, quality of the data that we were getting. Maybe we got a cost of a part, but you know, historically, you know, as it was mentioned, we may not know where that cost originally came from, and we keep using it as a guide. So we had to get to the quality of the data. And then really the ultimate goal is design for manufacturing. And what that means is, when you're designing a part, you send a part out to a supplier and then you wait, you know, 6, 7, 8 weeks, months for a response back. Is our part manufacturable? Is it cost competitive? Now, utilizing and integrating a priori, we get immediate feedback. Okay, we understand that we know the part's manufacturable, so we can address any other hurdles that come up. And then we decided that we needed to, you know, we don't want to look at the negative, right? So where can we improve opportunities? We want to get more efficient. We want to have early design interaction from the design team and make an impact there. And then knowledge sharing. So as it goes from design to engineering to purchasing to sourcing, we can leverage the information that's being output. So the designer understands as they're making changes and doing work from day to day that it actually impacts the cost. That was something that when I was in the design world, I would have loved to have seen, but we did a design based on a request, we delivered a product, and then we maybe heard something back 3-4 months later. So the idea was to get that information into the hands of the users every day. So what we came up with for a vision was to create a system that would optimize cost and quality for products through deep understanding of manufacturing and product development processes, have design engineers have early visibility to those processes, and then work with the sales and sourcing teams to come up with early cost targets, right? So if we don't have a target, where are we going, right? So we had to come up with some targets. So some of the challenges that we faced is understanding cost while chasing new business. Some of those challenges came from having lack of visibility to the cost drivers. You know, maybe the designers didn't have a grasp that if they made it a casting versus a forging or a forging versus a casting, that it would drive different complications. And then balance cost and manufacturability to customer requirements. I mean, the end goal is we need to deliver a product to the customer that they've asked for. You know, they expect a high quality, high performing product that fits their needs. At the same time, we have to be cost competitive and make sure that we're establishing margins for our business. So we had to make a strategic shift in change management, and how we've done that. We'll show where we started, but then as we get to where we're at today, integrating this into our change management process has been pretty integral. We want to get things done right the first time and reduce the churn of iterative processes throughout all phases. So some of the process or organization challenges that we saw early on were some inconsistent analysis and limited expert bandwidth. And as Rick mentioned, Mackenzie's expert service team was very imperative to helping our success, and still do today. So the other challenge is, as everyone is aware and we've made mention of already, is siloed work structures, right? How do we get information across the different cross-functional teams? So what we've came up with would be the best approach is 2 key areas of focus. So by this coming down from our leadership organization, in order to use a priori, we had to show a return on investment, right? Is this tool going to be valuable for our organization? So we focused on parts and products that were already in production. Were there opportunities that we could save some cost and make those changes? And then, are we making them in the right regions? You know, sit with our purchasing and supply organization. Are we making the parts in the correct place? Communication of should cost with our suppliers. So some suppliers would get kind of blindsided when we first started this. We basically said, we had this should cost. Show us where we're wrong, right? As Joe mentioned, it's okay to be wrong. If we did an analysis and it's way off, show us where the gaps were. So it was a learning process as we were getting started. So then new product development, design to cost and design for manufacturing. And then really critical was establishing cost targets. And then we needed to optimize those new designs based on our new processes. And in order to do that, we needed to understand cost drivers. So this is a busy slide, but you know, I think everyone is interested. Sometimes we start with a very small team of folks. So as we approached this from the Dana side, we developed what we called the Center of Excellence team. It was a team established, designed for manufacturing, assembly, quality, cost. That team is who we started out as for the experts in a priori. We pulled in folks from purchasing, from IT, from manufacturing, engineering, etc. And what the goal was there is to change manufacturing and cost from something that might have been poorly understood across the teams to something that's now based on upfront data and something that can be treated as a design variable, just like it would be mass or size. You know, if you're designing a part, you know that you have a mass target. Now we can design a part to a cost target. So in order to do that, that's the early stage value. So we knew that getting this in front of the designers was going to be key. We weren't able to do that up front. We know that it's a long road. We had some designers test the process for us, but it still required the expertise of our Center of Excellence team. And we'll get into where we're at today. Just as, you know, we started with a handful of people, and now we have 136 designers that use AP Design every day. So again, how we got started was commodity-based sprints. So we looked at a priori and said, what process groups would make sense for Dana? How can we use what is already there as an out-of-the-box tool, because we weren't a priori experts. We had to take the guidance of a priori expert services that have done a fantastic job. But again, we didn't know what we didn't know. So we had to start somewhere. So we took into consideration the a priori digital factories from the out-of-the-box presentation that the a priori team gave us. So we looked at this and said, okay, we'll pick a handful of these parts that would be the most cost impactful for Dana. And those parts proved to be sheet metal forming, forgings, castings, machinings, and gears. Dana does a lot of work with gearing, so gears were imperative for us to take a deeper dive at. So this is a bit busy, but this was, we said we had to establish milestones and checkpoints, and how are we going to get from point A to point B and be able to measure some level of success. So we had some checkpoints. We started at we'll say when I got involved towards the end of 2022. So from the end of 2022 to end of first quarter, we said we need to identify $200,000 in savings utilizing the a priori tool and processes. How we did that is with these sprints. So we started with stampings. Okay, so we took stampings and we worked with our commodity teams, and they gave us 100 stampings to look at, right? We didn't know where to start because, previous organizational approach, designers and engineers didn't have high visibility to cost. So we didn't know what parts to start with without some input from our team members. So they provided us a list of stampings to analyze. We were able to take those parts with expert services support because, again, there's a lot of variation in how our stampings are produced and how a priori might select them. So we did stampings, and then we moved on to castings. Castings was a little more, we were able to deeper dive into castings. We have a lot of casting plants around the world, so we had internal expertise to help us from the casting side. And then we moved on to forgings. But the key point of this slide is we worked with the a priori expert services team. We kind of jumped in feet first, and we used this as our training ground while also being able to show the leadership team that we were able to provide a return on investment by using the a priori tool. In parallel, we were using it for new program development or requests for quotes. So we would get quotes that would come in for new programs, and the program management team would say, hey, I have a 20% gap on this assembly. So we would deep dive the bill of material and pull out all of the parts that were higher in cost compared to should cost. Then we were able to hand select a few parts as opposed to going into a bill of material that has 300 parts. So a priori, we refer to it as should cost. So a priori and should cost are used, in tandem at Dana. So We identified those key commodities. They were selected based on key a priori digital factories. Since inception, we've made a lot of, we'll say, Dana modifications to those factories based on our global inputs, information from our plants and strategic suppliers. Because as was mentioned before, it's not just about cost. You also want to make sure that you're capturing your design for manufacturing feedback, your regional inputs. If we make a forging in India versus a forging in Mexico, how do we know which one is going to be the most strategic approach? So the configuration refinement. So fortunately, I have a great team. And we were able to take a priori's digital processes and go in and refine them to, machines and methods that we have at our internal plants. So now that when we quote a new program and we say, hey, we need to quote this casting, we are very confident in our casting should cost and design for manufacturing coming from that location. We're not concerned that the should cost is far off, whereas in the beginning we had to do a lot of, are we sure this is right? Everybody is always concerned, are we sure that it's right? So that was the key message, is we had to validate our findings, and we were able to do that with working closely with our internal plants. And then one thing to keep in mind is we knew that it wasn't going to be perfect. So as we analyzed parts through these sprints, 8% kept showing up. So if we saw something that varied outside of 8%, we knew that we should probably take a deeper look. We've since refined that number. We're narrowing that band greatly, but where we started, 8% was the target. If we saw something float outside of 8% of variation, we would key in on those components. So the design to cost analysis tool in a priori, as you can see, I think there were maybe 150 parts in this particular one, but we analyzed over 300 castings and put together a design to cost analysis. This allowed us to key in on which parts were the most cost impactful, but also identified where there were the most areas of opportunity. How can we improve cost in certain parts? Is it because of a negotiation? Is it because of a region? Is it because of tariffs? Why is the cost out of line? Maybe there's a good reason, right? But this gives you the picture to show what parts to go take a look at. And then also utilizing the a priori cost outlier tool. So as you can see, there's a pretty good flat line of not a whole lot to show, but what it does highlight is a handful of items that we should be focused on, right? That way we're not out there trying to deep dive 300 parts. We can deep dive 10 and have the team focus on those 10 parts as opposed to the parts that are already in line with expectations. So we talked about in the previous slide the checkpoints and how are we going to get there and what was our success. So through 2023, through the sprints, the checkpoints, the new product development quoting, cost avoidance, we set forth to analyze $100 million in business, and our goal was to save $1 million. We figured if we could analyze $100 million in business, we should be able to save $1 million. Through the use of the sprints and using it for supplier negotiation, for cost increases, et cetera, we were able to save $4.1 million in our first year of using a priori. And you say first year, there's probably people doing it a lot faster, but we used our first year as a training ground, right? How do we get the team formed so that we can deploy this across the greater organization? While we'd like to take credit and say we're the smart people and want to make sure that we're directionally correct for costs, what we really want to do is build a tool and a process that can be deployed from the bottom to the top, right? We want it into the hands of the designers. We want our purchasing and sourcing organization to be able to, pull up AP Workspace and say, hey, here's what the should cost is. I'm getting quotes from the supplier. Does it make sense? So we really used year one as, yes, we can use this tool and get a return on investment, and, we can also take it to where we have the expertise now to deploy it across the rest of the organization. So we've put together training plans for our engineering groups, for our purchasing groups. And when I say we, I really mean Dakota. But they're being put together. So the deployment across the different teams is imperative, because we're not looking to have a handful of experts. We want everybody to have visibility to what's happening for cost in manufacturing. And again, anything that was outside of that 8% is what was deep dived. And the other item is as you move throughout the year, I'm sure everyone's aware, you can't capture all of the savings in that first year, right? It trickles into year 2 and then year 3 and so on and so forth. So engineering cost optimization. So what are we really doing with this tool for engineering and design? So for our design team, it provides real-time feedback for design changes. The changes they're making, what does it do to cost? Are they making draft changes? Are they adding bosses? Are they drilling extra holes that we don't need necessarily? Are we adding more ribs to parts that may or may not be needed? So they're getting input to the design changes that they're making and the direction that they're choosing to go. And then from procurement, so early should cost availability. It was mentioned before, speed to quote. Everything has to go faster, right? Every day it needs to be faster. So we identify those areas of focus. So now in our process, we utilize a priori, as it was mentioned, as a fourth quote. So when a part is being sourced or resourced or changed, it's presented to the leadership team, with the supplier quotes, the internal plant pricing, and an a priori should cost. Are they aligned? Are they way off? Should we be making this somewhere else? It allows deeper conversations to be had. Are we making the right choices up front? So as Stephanie mentioned at the beginning, you don't have that 80% that you can't change later. You get stuck. And then VAVE. So a priori has been critical in our new approach to VAVE. It's not a one and done. It's a continuous process. So with everything going on in the world, we know what parts are the key contributors to the bill of material cost. And those parts are continually focused on. If we learn something from one program, maybe it needs to go back to the previous programs and reviewed. What would the cost be to make the change? Is it worth it? But we can do that in a CAD model now and run it through a priori instead of having to send it out for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks for a supplier response. And then just some examples. So what you see on the screen, it's a forged flange. So one of the designers that we got early on to kind of beta test a priori for us from an AP design standpoint was pretty excited to get in and start using the tool. So the part on the left-hand side is a handed flange. And this particular program needed to have some cost removed. So he looked at it for a few days, and then he comes back to me and he says, hey, what if I make a single forging, and then when we put it on the axle, we can machine it respectively, left hand, right hand. Well, that idea was able to save $5 an axle, which is pretty significant. It made over $1 million impact to the program for that, putting the tool into the hands of the designer and letting them do the work. Just another example. So not only is it a cost save, but it's manufacturability, weight savings. So this particular part, you can see it started out as a bracket design on the left and moved to the design on the right. So the design on the right is much easier to manufacture, significantly cheaper, and saved 6 pounds an axle. So it's pretty impactful. This particular item was close to $2 million in program impact on a single bracket just by putting the information in the hands of the designers. So AP design is proving to be pretty valuable for us. Again, Dakota and I look at a lot of parts, but we don't look at every aspect of every design, right? It really needs to get to the level where the people are doing the work. And then what saving opportunity methods have we leveraged? We leveraged cost negotiations, right? Data-driven should cost discussions. We're not going in blind, so we'll get a cost back from a supplier and says, here's your part cost. And maybe it comes with a cost breakdown, maybe it doesn't. So now with a priori, we've, with help of expert services, developed a cost breakdown template that we can export from the tool, review with our purchasing folks, and have that discussion with the supplier as to why the cost may or may not be in line. And then upfront design to cost, as we've mentioned, the design team's able to understand how design methodology and processes impact cost to the program. And cost avoidance, are there any things that we're doing in design that we shouldn't, that might be adding cost, right? I spent a lot of years in design, and to be fair, everyone wants their stuff to look cool, right? So if you want your stuff to look cool, maybe you add something that looks like a honeycomb pattern, or maybe you add some extra ribs or designs in the part that, all right, everyone's gonna know this is my part, but that might add a bunch of unnecessary cost. So we utilize this from a cost avoidance approach. So even though we all want our designs to look pretty, maybe they just need to be effective and cost effective and not necessarily pretty. And then continuous value analysis. So regional costing, supply-based book of business. And really what that means is we don't want to look at just a singular part, right? So if we have a singular casting and it comes from supplier X, that supplier might provide us 100 castings, and overall, maybe they're the most competitive supplier that we have, so that we may or may not go harass them about that one part, right? That's out of line for should cost. So we look at it from a holistic business strategy approach as well. So instead of just focusing on one key part, we can look at the whole book of business for a particular supplier or location and make a business decision that way. And then really what we mean by regional costing is best cost, best region, right? And what that does for us is if we make a part in Mexico or Thailand or India or China or the US, what is truly the best cost for the best region? And we have to look at it holistically. So right now we have a team in India. They are imperative to our success. They deep dive every aspect of everything that we send them. So right now we're working on logistics and tariff impacts and how those things are going to impact that best cost, best region approach. Because we all know that we've seen a significant shift in that here lately. And then just one example, somebody mentioned assemblies or systems. So this particular piece, I know Terry had mentioned it some time back in discussions here with a priori. We had one part on the screen that's kind of in the middle there with the little tang thing on it. That part, it could be a machined forging. It could be a fine blanked part. It could be a powdered metal part. It could be a fine blanked machined part. So we were able to take that part and run it through a priori using all of those different scenarios without ever having to go outside and talk to suppliers. Just with our internal knowledge and expertise, able to utilize that within a priori and come up with the best approach up front. And by taking that handful of components and running them through that methodology, it was almost $16 a system savings for that small grouping of parts. But one of the key things to mention here is the part on the top left. The designer made the part. We got a request to analyze it, and it wouldn't analyze. It just said, nope, not going to cost. So we deep dived it, and there's an undercut feature and radius intersections and things that can't really be manufactured. And a priori said, nope, you can't make it, so I can't cost it. So we sent it back to the designer. The designer made the updates. We costed it through a priori, and it ended up being $5 cheaper than the original quoted price. And when we had that discussion with the supplier, they're like, yep, because we couldn't make it before. So now it's, we got to where we needed to be, but the tool highlighted it for us. So a lot of power in putting the information in the hands of the people that use it day to day. And one of the items, I don't think I created a slide for it, maybe. So organizational integration. Again, we mentioned the two key areas of focus: new product development, value analysis, process-based cost analysis. But one of the key things is what we learned early on is regardless of who's using a tool, we have to have a method for somebody to request an analysis. So we created a process that allows someone to request, maybe it's one part, maybe it's 20. They'll send a request to our Center of Excellence team, and we'll analyze the parts and have a meeting with them and provide real-time feedback on that information. But really the key is we've given access and visibility to all of these different cross-functional teams through our Center of Excellence group and a priori, again, and a lot of guidance and feedback from Mackenzie's team and a priori expert services. It's been imperative. And then just a quick snapshot while we wrap it up. To date, we have a priori users in 17 locations on 4 continents currently. Our largest use base being Pune, India and Maumee, Ohio. But we've expanded it across all of these other regions. You'll see regions in Mexico. It's one of our key casting areas. So everybody is looking at the same information real time.